This may be the fastest I've ever managed to get a Capstone delivered, only a couple weeks post-release as compared to the years I sometimes spend on the games I'm the most dedicated to. And this introduces a question in my mind. How do game reviews even work at this juncture in time in our age of software as a service? Unlike film, literature, sculpture, or painting, rarely in digital media are we experiencing the final product anymore. State of Decay 2 is a Capstone, still in progress. Yet Doom was easy to write up in the post-campaign, which then brings us to 2 Point Campus, the successor to the critically and financially acclaimed 2 Point Hospital. With 2 Point Hospital, I had the luxury of coming into the game in its twilight years, fully updated with quality of life improvements, bug fixes, updates, and DLC. And with 2 Point Campus, I did not. That's where our story begins, because to play 2 Point Campus now is not so different than 2 Point Hospital then. The first thing we need to address is that despite the lion's share of reviews and the mainstream of games media telling everyone that 2 Point Campus is a revelation, it is not. 2 Point Campus is by and large 2 Point Hospital. Now, Hospital was my game of the year for 2021, and I go fully in depth with my journey 100%ing the game and thoughts there in that capstone. But this also means that over the course of my many hours sunk into 2 Point Hospital, 2 Point Campus was then immediately recognizable. It was an old familiar, from the caricatures that represent the simulation going through their mostly robotic functions, with the occasional RNG spurt and squirt to give the illusion of autonomy. I'm familiar with the squeezing of boost items into the tiniest functional space ad nauseum. I'm familiar with the loans, income, expenses, balance sheets. I'm familiar with the hiring page, traits like Iron Bladder or the ever-useful Rapid. These all make their way back, excluding, unfortunately, the fun legendary perk Healer that I believe could have been Sage or something similar to add something to liven up the RNG search for optimized staff. And this all led to an equally familiar sensation in 2 Point Hospital of repetitive actions done repeatedly on repeat. Because 2 Point Hospital, if you haven't already realized, has an Achilles heel with repetition. As aforementioned, once the player knows the logistic flow and has a set of templates saved, understands how to staff and prioritize, well, you already own the tools to beat any challenge, any level. This copy and paste dormitory, copy and paste bathroom, copy and paste lecture hall are direct analogs to reception desk, bathroom, GP's office. So intertwined is the 2 Point Hospital DNA in 2 Point Campus that some assets are just direct swaps from the latter. Rooms like pastoral support in the med bay act like triggers scratching at the 2 Point Hospital addiction of GP office and psychiatry office, almost direct asset flips.
Now, we're not here to judge anybody. We want to handle this with love, right? You want to tell him how his drug abuse has hurt you, maybe hurt himself. Okay, Harold, what time did you tell him to be here?
5 o'clock, but he's always late.
No, he'll be here. In 3, 2, 1.
Is this a 5 o'clock free crack giveaway?
Frustrating here is that these rooms are completely needed but entirely redundant. These are rooms that advise students to either sleep or get a shower, but more on that in a moment. The defense of such a premise for a sequel is that, well, it's 2 Point, and like our premise of game reviews being in a state of flux, like the games they seek to pin a judgment to, so is our view of the sequel. The sequel isn't perhaps meant to be a great reimagining of the original, and most would argue they are not meant to be a total rework from the foundation up. Halo is still Halo, COD is still COD, Madden still Madden, so on. A topic I've spoken on at length is the double-edged sword of sequels in the era of live service, and the dual cost in both failure to grow and experiment, but also the backlash ignited in doing such. 2 Point Campus then is a sequel that doesn't set out to reinvent the wheel. The question then is, how does 2 Point Campus manage to differentiate itself from 2 Point Hospital to warrant being called a sequel over an expansion? There's a hierarchy list for this. First are the minor things. Bookworms, career goals for Kudosh visible at all times, quality of life changes present in Hospital at its end state are present as default conditions like blueprints. Training rooms receive tweaks that are arguably an optimization and better system as they no longer require a teacher. There's seasons of rush, the school year, and then there's pause, summer breaks, which are made frustrating by their total inertness. You have the inability to train workers or offer a summer session or just any other change up to the formula, but overall it still is a new addition to the game. Staff changes, doctor is now a professor, nurses are now assistants, janitors are still janitors, only given a slight change in the skill of security, and new gameplay mechanics and challenges tried the DLCs of 2 Point Hospital make a return, with the moles of the spy level resembling hunting aliens in Goldpan. Wizardry School is a much slimmed down version of Chasm 24. Breaking Point, similar to the Green DLC's quest for attraction rating, only now focusing on students' happiness and throwing parties. Most of the levels follow a similar pattern of 2 Point Hospital, with its gradual but sufficient addition of new systems to manage and challenges to meet therein. Blundergrad being the largest challenge by far, closely related to Duckworth upon Bilge, where money isn't gained by traditional means, and they throw a total monkey wrench in everything you've learned up to this point to trick you. And this is added upon with Breaking Point, as money is brought in from student hack. That's where at this point in the 2 Point Hospital review, I noted that the game continued to plug away, adding challenges up to the point of Surgery's introduction, which I felt didn't go far enough, but that later DLCs attempted to prove upon by introducing new challenges like Rush Mode. But because I am reviewing 2 Point Campus at launch, this game doesn't have that same benefit. That being said, with so much of the predecessor's successes present in the successor, there's less defense in that post-Blundergrad the game is on easy mode. There's nothing new to introduce. Whereas Surgery became the ultimate test of one's ability to staff, manage queues, and stabilize, then heal patients, 2 Point Campus settles on giving the player a free pallet to run up the flagpole. That isn't to say Campus doesn't achieve what Hospital managed to up to Pebbly Ruins, because it does. But in the final lap of the campaign, the last 2 or 3 levels, it feels called in. That achievement takes us to the larger changes from the Hospital formula. Students are a much deeper version of patients, campus buildings, exterior decoration, and trickling down to a slightly lesser degree UI changes. More important than you might think though. And room prestige. Let's tackle room prestige. No longer capped at 5, this is where Campus most tries to break out of the repetition of Hospital by adding diminishing returns to item spam. Eradicated are the days of tedious and bland gold star award spam for the 5-star room prestige and contentment. Room prestige now also brings with it more impact, happiness, energy level rating, campus level, which gives a monthly income bonus and access to higher tier loans. So players are now rewarded for building bigger rooms rather than defaulting to the smallest possible area to save space, and are penalized for duplicating items, all while making prestige more important. In the case of the dormitory, with its accommodation rating designating rent costs and the application of the campus buildings to make the entire building process more accessible, the question is, did 2 Point Studios create a better system? Yes and no. See, it's an efficient way to get around the Gordian knot that was the gold star duplication prestige loop, without having to create some vastly different system that somehow rewards creativity over functionality. The new system just cuts away the main problem: cramped rooms, gold star duplication. At the same time, it doesn't create some wholly new experience for building games or 2 Point in general, as a slightly bigger room is now the go-to, but going too big is still not advisable. And yes, it does force some more creativity in, but gold star spam just becomes spam everything you own. And while the argument can be you don't have to, you could be as creative as you'd like to be. With 36 stars to unlock across levels that are many hours long, I tip my hat to anyone who is willing to still meticulously handcraft every hallway, dozens of dormitories, bathrooms, and showers that anyone who plays this game will be building throughout. 2 Point Studios takes this new twist on the building one step further with classrooms, but doesn't quite finish the thought. See, gone are the days of cure rooms being required item, gold star award, fire extinguisher. In fact, fires are just gone in general in this one, which is probably for the better. Chair, coffee, snack machine. Done. Like a Chipotle burrito. Rice, beans, meat, lettuce, wrap. Many rooms now come with more accessories that are often required for upper year students. The computer lab takes us much further than the others by having different era technology as a requisite, all of which tends to be expensive. There are more classrooms than their analog cure room, and they have more items that boost learning, even though these two have diminishing returns. Often these learning items need kudos to unlock. One can couple this with tighter monetary supply overall, and we have a game that is both aware of its past errors and does try to correct them, and also nearly does. Despite the addition and challenge of room prestige, more required items, tighter money, there comes a time when spamming blueprints is the simplest and best answer to the star requirement set in front of you, and realistically the best use of your time, which meant by the end of my campaign run, the all too familiar gameplay loop of Control-C and Control-V of needed rooms in whatever space was available began to present itself, fiddling down the the requisite rooms and leaving the game to do something else while it made money in the background. And I did more engaging activities, like mow the lawn and brush my teeth. The only difference between the 2 Point Hospital and 2 Point Campus experience in this regard is that I had 2 sets of blueprints for each room rather than the 1 set per room that I had in Hospital. With 2 Point Campus, I'd have 1 blueprint for the early going that was bare bones, tightly compact, rudimentary but functional, and then a later blueprint for when cash was abundant, which despite more squeeze in the early game, the money flows in freely later so long as you build everything correctly, i.e. copy and paste. When reduced down to its bare essence, the only difference between the 2 games in the building process was there being more stuff placed, an equally haphazard and meaningless spatter of decoration, only now newly non-uniform, is a bronze dog statue in a spy lab combined with posters of musical notes and a rainbow pride flag, all revealing the calculus that drives us gamers at our hearts: beating games. And that is an exceptionally long paragraph just on the prestige change, which is why I will now answer this question in a final and direct way. Is the building system better than 2 Point Hospital? Yes. 2 Point Campus rewards creativity more so than Hospital, and that's both a difficult thing to create, judge, and account for in game design. They did so without having to totally reconstruct their most engaging system, which is building rooms for our caricatures to prance, fart, dance, and skitter throughout. I found myself not defaulting to my set of blueprints as much as I did in 2 Point Hospital. At times, the smaller starting budget, limited space, forced me to stop the game, think out a plan, and build a fitting Creation. I just wish this happened more often, because this is the 2 Point formula at its best, both in Hospital and here. Campus fails in the challenge regard. It's both easier than 2 Point Hospital, coupled with failures to introduce more complex obstacles. In this case, where 2 Point Hospital had surgery to represent grand strategy and mastery of all the skills up to this point, as most great puzzle and simulation games do, games like It Takes Two or Guacamelee or Affordable Space Adventure all follow the working philosophy of introduction of a gameplay element, challenge players around this new mechanic, and then in the eventual final conflict, combine all said elements into one great challenge. Campus is the living example of, if you want a small change, change how you do things. If you want a big change, change how you think about things. By not going any deeper than repetition bad, the chains of repetitive gameplay return despite the illusion. By 2 Point's failure of imagination in simply changing how they do things and not how they think about things. This ties into the largest single change to building from Hospital to Campus. Campus buildings and exterior design. Unlike Hospital, where players were given a template and then asked to use it accordingly, Campus allows the player to wipe the slate totally if they so wish. If one wants to shape their campus into one monolithic building, or use a strip mall style approach like myself, or even, large phallic designs, that's mostly allowed. Outdoor spaces are not inert travel areas anymore, but paths to be designed and honed to improve the campus experience. I argue this was the biggest technical lift accomplished by 2 Point Studios, and I want to give praise where praise is due, for they're giving the player more freedom to build how they see fit. The tie-in element is this: by allowing for exterior buildings and the destruction of the set layout, my gameplay inevitably just funneled towards more blueprint spam. See, in a game as unvaried as 2 Point Campus is, even more so than Hospital for reasons previously mentioned, the blueprint is an absolute necessity, and it's appreciated. You couldn't play this game without it. It would be far too tedious. But still, I was at my most engaged with Campus when I was forced to kick the crutch and use what space and money I had. The early going of Pebbly Ruins, with its entirely blank slate, low capital, limited floor space, eliminated my ability to just copy and paste my tried and true library and dormitory. Instead, I was forced to handcraft a corner library that included both functionality and high prestige. This was 2 Point Campus and the 2 Point experience at its peak. I was proud of what I made, and I enjoyed getting to see the simulation run through the room that I had just designed. It's like memories of childhood, building Lego cities with the imaginary characters there within. Yet, by allowing freeform campus buildings, in the end, I could dictate exactly the layout I wanted and needed to cram in my bland utilitarian commie blocks of blueprint spam. This was finally combined with a further gamification. Weather outside of the wizard school doesn't change, and while temperature control is back on as a challenge, it feels more tacked on than thought through, with all outside areas and hot levels being temperate, and cold zones are easily warmed by outdoor heaters, meaning that I fully abused the fresh air bonus, a perpetual boon that rather than a flat buff, gives a constant addition of happiness, healthiness, and energy. By the end of my campus experience, what had begun as a Tetris-like challenge in Pebbly Ruins ended with my building the minimum-sized campus buildings, given room enough for one building to supply one function, a campus building for the dorm, a campus building for the bathroom, so on, forcing students students to live in the exterior space, only being inside when forced to go to bed, use the bathroom, or go to class. Meaning overall, campus does absolutely allow the creative type to have more fun with it. But for those of us that are gamers, beating a game and playing it from that standpoint, these changes to the prestige system, building, and the exterior design are only mechanics that further reveal the regimented routine of working any campus challenge. Bringing us then finally to the final edition. Perhaps not the biggest mechanically or meaningfully, but could be the largest in terms of scale. Students. Students are a breed above patients. Where patients were potatoes, students are cougars. Where patients are a wagon, students are a Porsche. And yet, none of that actually matters. In the end, like the prestige system, like the campus building and exterior system, there's no escaping that in the end they only seem to represent floating points of money to the player, because all of this is trapped inside the 2-point structure. Like the paradox that is the matrix within the matrix, there is just no escaping the paradigm that a video game is ultimately a game. It troubles me to say this, as I can tell the students running around in night helmets or clown suits, going to concerts, falling in love, joining clubs were an absolute labor of love. Hundreds, if not thousands, of unique animations and models for each course, each year, and each club, and each location. Impressive, technical, creative, and visual feat that can just be totally ignored by the player if they so wish. Students, most importantly, need a good dormitory to crush their financial future with rent and tuition expenses, an adequate bathroom, being mindful of room capacity that is at the very least soft cap, so don't overthink it, a shower, a good lecture hall. The classrooms are a matter already discussed. From here, a player like myself can be, and I was, totally oblivious to the students having deeper personalities than the staff. Goths apply a dark aura bonus, and even want items that match their personalities, which is something that I felt could have improved the classroom design idea even further, by designing rooms to match staff personality. Musical students will play music on the streets to improve happiness of passerbys. Archaeology students use their metal detectors to find treasure in their free time. Students will join clubs, leveling both the club's prestige to give the player more rewards, and themselves to give more bonuses. Speedwalkers will randomly ignite nitro from their anus and zip around campus like the slightly faster walkers that they are. And nature club acolytes will trek the campus grounds in the buff, hugging trees and occasionally picking up litter. Assistants will interact, guide, and order these lively students like a mother goose herding her chicks. It's all fascinating to watch. It's also meaningless. It's meaningless within the mission structure and the objectives of 2-Point Campus. This grand improvement over the patient system to the robustly designed students has little impact nor bearing within the mission structure and game design of 2-Point Campus. And even beneficial details like events that can be scheduled for these students to enjoy rarely represent anything more than a statistical bonus that for my part I just repeated every year and crammed onto the schedule until full. More fulfilling events like cooking competitions, jousting tournaments, or talent shows are hamstrung by their inability to have more than one scheduled per year despite having more than one classroom, and the outcome of the contest just being a direct result of leveling students and getting past a certain point. So then these become only events to press X upon to get their statistical bonus, or just ignore as money-wasting, time-wasting ingredients for glitches and a further assault on finicky students getting to the bathroom or shower in time. 2-Point Campus makes a tremendous effort with students, and with students, 2-Point Campus begins to approach a full-throated, honest-to-God sequel more than a reskin. And yet, despite the leap they represent in both technicality and complexity from patients, students fail to have any pragmatic impact or matter to the gameplay's objectives, that is, get the stars. While that maybe matters less to the creative type, who just wants to be present with the experience and whimsically enjoy the comic and pseudo-random nature of the simulation, we can't get around what the game is asking its players to do at the core. What the fundamental game design tasks the player with. Get the stars, beat the levels. And those objectives can be done with little to no attention paid to students altogether, their various life partners, their club attendance, their unique dancing skills. In fact, for my part, it wasn't until the last couple levels where I started to notice that students were more than just placeholder art. In this way, 2-Point Studios either put too much effort towards becoming like a Sims game or not enough. All of that effort put towards unique student personalities could have perhaps been development time put towards even more refinements on the building system, like changing the paradigm altogether to get out of the repetition loop, or the option existed to double down on that Sims route like they did with the students. But that would mean changing the objectives of the game, needing to shape our campus and rooms to be more idiosyncratic with the various Sims occupying. everything, like is done in the classic Maxis games. And so this represents a major miss in the gameplay for 2 Point Studios, as the students inside the campus are not the protagonist, nor is the player asked with seeing the students as representations of the protagonist. The player is the protagonist, and the protagonist is the administrator and builder. Fittingly, those are the objectives we're preoccupied with. The stilted autonomy of the students is just dressing on the plate to enjoy, the main dish being the rat maze we've built for the simulation to live within. And as such, that old familiar feeling of we, the protagonist as administrator, being reminded every 15 minutes to drink water and harassed to place decorations and vending machines by the not so generic it turns out automatons, brought me back to 2 Point Hospital. And these feelings are fine, but overall it makes the game not that dissimilar from just being an expansion of 2 Point Hospital. This, in conclusion, disappoints me, as later expansions and DLCs of 2 Point Hospital understood more fundamentally the game design that drives the 2 Point formula, challenging the player's building and management skills to deeper levels, with the Speedy Recovery DLC tasking the player to take a more active role in the ingress and egress of patients from ambulances. And like surgery before, adding another layer to the patient flow puzzle that 2 Point Hospital in reduction represents, meaning 2 Point Campus is, by its very DNA, a profile in the same and of the same. At its reduction point, a puzzle in student flow. And all the levers that work to create that ingress and egress, while maybe having some oil put on the hinges and in some cases even adding new areas for the pinball to jostle, bounce, and burst forth, is still, when stripped down to its bare minimum working parts, a pinball rushing at the player on its slight angled grade. And whether we Control C our paddle left or Control V our paddle right, it's still a game of pinball, a 2 out of 3.